Here is the bolt for the crankshaft. This crankshaft pulley bolt right there. So basically, to get this thing out, you have to have a 19mm socket, which sits right there onto the bolt. And then I picked up this power built on it, so I can get a shot of that. Power built. Stick that on top of there, and as you hold the 50mm tool, you turn the 19mm socket and it breaks the bolt loose. Here are some of the special tools you're going to need to perform this job. First thing you're going to need is a 19mm socket. This is a 1/2 inch 19mm deep. You could use a short if you have it. The other tool here is a 50mm crankshaft pulley tool. KD makes one and Powerbuilt makes one as well. Basically what you do is, if this is a crankshaft, you stick this here to hold the crankshaft pulley in place, and you come in with your socket and break the bolt loose. So let me show you how this is done. You need 2 1/2 inch breaker bars. So that would excuse me. That would sit on there like that, and you take this. This would hold the crankshaft pulley in place, and you stick the socket in and turn the bolt. If you have somebody to help you while you do this part, you're better off to hold the crankshaft pulley in place. And then I have a long 1/2 inch. It's actually a 20 inch 1/2 inch extension, 1/2 inch extension. So then this comes in like that. Someone holds the crankshaft and you turn the bolt. So that's how that works. This tool, I think it cost me less than $30. I picked it up from Amazon. But you can. I've also seen places that rent these as well. So if you can rent one, or somebody has, a friend has one, pick this up, because without this tool you're not going to be able to do this job, and 80% of the job lies with the removal of the crankshaft pulley bolt. Here are some of the chemicals I have. I'm going to talk about the liquid wrench first. If you're dealing with a vehicle that's been near the ocean or near a lot of water, I think of Portland. Portland comes to mind, but a place that has a lot of water. What happens to the bolt is it gets rusted on there onto the crankshaft pulley. About a week in advance, go ahead and spray some penetrating oil on it, and throughout the week, spray some before you even attempt this job. If anything, if all else fails, get this stuff on here about 48 hours in advance before you try to turn the crankshaft pulley bolt. With the penetrating oil, it'll make it a lot easier for this to come out, and these things can be stuck on there. I've seen them where you have to actually heat up the bolt to get it loose. You're also going to need some whiteout. Pick this up at any drugstore. You're going to need this for the timing belt. Some spray adhesive. You're going to need this when we do the water pump. And an oil can when you put the bolts back into place. Also, I have here is a 0 offset long wrench. It's a 14 and 17mm. It's made by Genius Tools. Part number is 781417L. And the cool thing about this is when you're doing the idler pulleys, this allows you. The idler pulleys are 14mm. This allows you to slide in between the side of the front of the engine and the side of the between the engine and the vehicle itself. So you get to slide in right down in there and break the bolt loose. It's kind of hard without this. I mean, it can be done, but this tool makes it a lot easier. Not only because of the length of the wrench, but also because, as you can see here, the head sticks out a little bit, so it is able to fit in tight in more tight spots than a regular wrench would. So that's the advantage of this. So if you can, get 2 1/2 inch breaker bars. This is a 20 inch 1/2 inch extension. 19mm socket, long or deep, and then a 50mm crankshaft pulley tool. Like I said, you can buy these, you can rent them. This one's actually by Power Built, and KD makes one as well. Now I'll put a link for where you can find these online in the description as well. A couple more items you're going to need to complete this job are going to be 2 jack stands and a floor jack. If you have 2 floor jacks, great. If you only need to have one, you can do with it. You can make do with it, I should say. The red one there is a 3.5 ton. I believe the black one is a 3 ton, maybe 2.5 ton. But you need them to prop up the vehicle, and then once the vehicle is secured, you're going to need them to hold up the engine a little bit when you remove the motor mount. Jack stands are used to secure the vehicle, and then when you're breaking the crankshaft pulley bolt loose, you're going to use it then as well. You're going to use a cardboard too, something to lay on. The floor is real dirty, so pick yourself up a piece of cardboard to be used as a floor mat basically. But yeah, if you have 2 jack stands, 2 floor jacks, and then some chocks if you have them for the wheels. But yeah, if you have these things, makes the job go a whole lot easier. I guess if you only had a scissor floor jack, you could do it. A little bit more unstable, but it could be done. The thing to remember is you need to remove the passenger side front tire and then secure it in place while you do all the work, because the tire cannot be on while you do this. If you can get a buddy to help you to do this, even the more better, but I'm using a jack stand to hold the half-inch extension. It's a 20-inch half-inch extension that's connected to the end of a 19mm socket. Alright, I have that in place there. If you have somebody to help you, it's a lot easier. What I've done is I've took the breaker bar and I've placed it against the lower control arm, going up against the tool, and then that's how I'm going to leverage the breaker bar so it doesn't move when I turn the bolt. If you have somebody to help you, like I said, it's a lot easier. You can do it by yourself, but go ahead and spray it down with penetrating oil first. If anything, 48 hours in advance will make all the difference in the world. Alright, I have the 18mm in place. 19mm, I'm sorry. 19mm socket. This is a 19mm bolt. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. And it's loose. Just like that. Like I said, the penetrating oil did all the magic. So that's it right there. That was the hardest part of this whole job. So invest a little bit of money. You're going to be saving yourself, at least $1,000 doing this by yourself. So take some of that money, invest in a tool, a couple breaker bars, long extension, and you'll be able to get this thing out. But if you can't get it out, just stop where you're at, because you're not going to go anywhere. You can't get this out. There you go. That was the hardest part of the whole job. Now don't get me wrong, it's not always that easy. There's times when it's harder to do that than what I just did right there, but yeah, once you get it out, you're pretty good to go. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to reinstall this bolt so that I can turn the crankshaft and line up on the markings on top. On the cams, they're marked 1 through 6, and I want to get it to 1. You want this on cylinder number 1, top dead center of 1. Let me show you that right now. Okay, what I was talking about, on the very top, On the two top covers for the timing belt, there are little viewports. One is right there. The other one is right here. I've already opened it so you can see, but this basically shows as a window to the front of the cam so you can tell which cylinder you're on. So to get these open, all you gotta do is a little tab. Just open that up. And that's gonna allow you access to see what number cylinder you're on. Alright, what you're looking at excuse me, what you're looking at is the inside of that cover I was showing you. That's the camshaft, the forward facing camshaft closest to the radiator. Now I'm going to rotate the engine to bring it to cylinder number 1. Check both sides, the front and the rear cam, to make sure that they're on number 1 so that the timing is set for when you take off the belt. Let's see, there's 4. There's 1. Had to go all the way around on that sucker. Alright. So like I said, once you break the crankshaft pulley bolt loose, go ahead and reinstall it. Bring your timer on to 1. So then I will double check the front, make sure the rear's on 1, and we should be good to go. Next thing I'm going to do, you have to get the steering pump out of the way. I'm going to do this by moving this bolt here, that bolt there. There's one down here, there's one down there, and you have to loosen up the adjustment nut as well. I'm going to pull this line back, get out of the way, and then move the power steering pump up and forward. So let's do that. Two 10mm bolts right here. Now when you pull one of the pressure lines off power steering pump, you're going to have some residual power steering fluid leak. So before you pull it off, have a towel ready or a rag, and pull it up and then wrap it. There you go, see. And we get this one next. It's 10mm long. 10 or 12, I'll tell you in a second. Try the 10 first. Nope, it's a 12. Yep. Alright, now that you have secure with the floor jack, you can go ahead and take off the motor mount. These top two bolts are 14 millimeter. That one there and that one there. I'm going to take the other one out. Alright, next thing you want to do is take off the motor mount. There's a 17 millimeter bolt that holds it in. It's right there. Okay, I have the motor mount out. And take the belt out. Actually, I need to loosen up the tensioner. Take the belt out. Should be 14 millimeter. So I'm using my long zero offset wrench to go ahead and reach down there. Get that on there. Then loosen it up and slip the belt off. Both belts are loose, so I'm going to pull that one off. And then the power steering belt as well comes back over. The crank. So, see how it pull these guys loose. What are they getting hung up on? Well, that one's getting held up on the engine mount. And this one should be loose. I'm just going to double check them right now. They look in really great shape. Replaced them less than a year ago. So I'm just going to go ahead and reuse them. They look really good. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is remove the bolt. It's a 10 millimeter bolt for the dipstick. It's bouncing off a mirror right here. That's why you're able to see it. I'll pan out here in a second, but that's a 10 millimeter. It sits right above the tensioner and right below the right side front cover. So pull that up. And you can see kind of right above the tensioner and like right above that, right above the green dot is where it sits. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take the dipstick bolt out, freeing up the dipstick. Need to get that out of the way as well. A little tight. Use your fingertips to pull the rest of pull this bolt out. Try not to drop it down there. Alright, it's loose. Trying to ease it out. There it is. Tiny little 10mm for the dipstick. So go ahead, let's pull the dipstick. Oil looks good. You want to wiggle this a little bit. Comes right out. Now there's an O-ring right here. You can either replace that to ensure that there's no oil leaks, or when you put it back in, you can coat it with some fresh oil. If this is cracked or torn, ripped, go ahead and replace it. Okay, next all you gotta do, pop this front cover off. It's going to give you access to the front upper cover, front camshaft cover I should say. Place this off to the side. Right here, this wiring harness needs to come out over this part of the front cover, camshaft cover I should say. There's 5 bolts that hold this one on, and there's 5 bolts that hold this one on as well. 1, 2, 3. There's one back there and one right here. 5. And once I get the front and rear camshaft covers on, I'm going to double check the timing as well. But I'm going to remove this bolt right here to help loosen up that wiring harness. That's like 10mm. Okay, got that loose. Pull that up, and this cover's actually pretty old, so those tabs broke. But in a perfect world, you would want to try to get that wiring harness up and over without breaking that. Let's get these 5-10mm out. You guys could use power or air tools if you have them. I'm just doing this so you guys can see that it can be done without air tools. Not everybody has air tools, so I don't think you need to go out there and buy a compressor or anything like that to get this job done, because you don't. It can all be done by hand. Takes a little bit more time, but hey. There's kind of a hole in the cover. Don't forget one of the bolts sits there on this as well as the one in the back, the rear front cover. one's loose. You can tell these bolts from the other ones because they have that shank at the very top. You can see right here. Bottom half is threaded, top half is a shank. 10 millimeter. Got a 10 millimeter wrench for this one. And the last one sits right here. Can't see it because of the angle of the shot, but it sits right on that side. Yeah, there's a front engine cover where you can see the timing belt. Right there. With the front cover off, that's the first time you can take a look at the timing belt. It's blocked by the air conditioning line, but there it is. The front cam. Here's a front cam. The rear cam here. Still has a cover on it, so I'm going to do that one next. Just like the front one, there's 5 bolts on here. Hold it in, 5 10 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and take those out. One, two. There's one here in the middle, just like the front. And there's 2 back here. Trying to drop this back there. Be a real hassle. And I'm going to need to mount it again. .10mm deep was too long, so I'm going to try the 10mm short. There's a wire right there. That's part of the rear cover. So you got to pull that out too. So I just pulled the bottom out. I'm going to slide it out of the top so I don't run the risk of ripping those wires internally and damaging it. So now I'm just trying to pop it out of this runner. But this thing has been in here a long time, it looks like. I'm just sliding the screwdriver behind the wiring harness. Woohoo! It's out. One thing to notice on these is that there is a seal on here. Not even necessarily a seal, it's just kind of a, I guess a measure for if this thing decides to leak a little bit. They have a rubber grommet, almost like an O-ring. I've seen these where they come out, they pop out. So if they do, just go ahead, slide it back in there before you reinstall them. And what I like to do is, when the bolts are pulled out, go ahead and set them in place and set it aside. That way you're keeping everything together. This center aluminum part is part of the engine mount. It's the side that mounts to the engine. There's 2 bolts on the bottom that hold it on. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen those up. Not take it off completely, but loosen it up. Okay, right there what you're looking at is the side of the motor mount from the engine. There's 3 14mm bolts that hold this thing in here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and loosen these up right now before I take the lower bottom cover off. These suckers can be up pretty tight. Okay, it's loose. Move on to the next one. You can see from the video there's one more right there. So there's one there, and one right there. That's the last one. Alright, broke it loose. Now be careful when you remove these or actually tighten them. This engine is aluminum, so you're putting these bolts into a aluminum block basically. So it's pretty easy to over tighten them. So just be careful when you're putting them back in. And that's on any aluminum engine. Not just necessarily a J-series engine. Okay, I'm going to loosen these up for right now. I'm going to leave them there so I get the lower cover off. And come back and take it all off. Another bolt you need to remove that sits on top of the, I can't even think of the name. The motor mount, side motor mount, is this one right here. It's actually part of an electrical connector, but it goes into the aluminum motor mount. So you need to remove that as well to actually get it off. To get the motor mount off, I should say. Alright guys, what you're looking at here is a timing belt. This is a front cam. And when I told you about special tools that you're going to need, I said you need a can of whiteout. Well, this is why. Basically what I'm doing is, there's a little tiny mark on the gear itself. Right there. Right there. And it's a little, like it looks like a little indentation, like somebody took a chisel and smacked it. There's a mark right here as well on the back. Now what happens is you eyeball it from when the cover was on and I pulled the viewport. That's what you're looking at. You're seeing a number on this side right here of the cam. So what I did is I took some whiteout and I marked it on the timing belt all the way across. Now there's two reasons for this. The first reason being that once I line it up with this mark on the back, I know I'm top dead center. And then also when I pull it off, I'm going to basically count the teeth between the front cam and the rear cam, and that way I know how many teeth are in between the two, and when I put the new belt on, I know that it's already lined up, because I'm going to take the new belt, mark it, count the teeth from the old belt, and then transfer the number to the new one, and that way I know that there's correct amount of room between the two for the new belt. So I'll show you how that works as well, but this is a little bit off. You can see right there, that's where it needs to be. It's over here. So I'm going to go ahead and move it a little bit. Okay, it's lined up. If I look at the back as well, it's lined up too. Alright. I'll just put that there to hold it, just in case I need to turn the engine again. Place that off to the side. Now this crankshaft should just pull out. Now when you pull this out, there is a key. Now I'm just walking it back and forth. Yeah, it's coming out. So there is a key in here that goes into the on top where the notch is, and then there's also a plate. So I'll show you that as well. So what you're looking at, you can see the key right now, and I'll point it out to you. That's the key right there on top. Pay close attention to the way that comes out so you can put it back in right, but I'll show you the right way to do it right now. What you're looking at is the key for the crankshaft. As you can see right here, there's a little, basically a steel brick, a little steel brick. It's basically square, except for this little part right here in the corner. It's rounded off. All the other corners come to a point, except for this one right here. So if this drops out while you're working on it, while you're pulling the lower cover off, just know that this point right here goes towards the engine, and the rounded part is towards the bottom. Right? So if this was the crank, if my fingers were the crank, it slides in just like that. Okay? So the rounded part towards the bottom and facing towards the engine. This is what it looks like. You can see there's a notch where it sits on top of the keyway. And the thing to remember about this is it's kind of concaved. Hopefully you guys can see that. So this part right here, the very top edge, leads out that way. So you want the plate facing like this, the concave part facing you, and the smooth part that's leading away goes towards the belt, the timing belt itself. That way there's no rough edges tearing away at the belt. Just a nice smooth surface for the belt to ride along, or if it brushes up against it. So keep that in mind, because a couple times I pull these out and all of a sudden you just hear, and you're like, what was that? And that's what that was. So I'm going to walk this out. It's coming out real nice. And there it is. It's off. There's the back side of the pulley. You can see the plate in there. Here is the key. It's basically this, sitting inside of there. If I line it up right, you guys will be able to see it. So imagine that on the other side of the lower cover. So there's one of them. There's two of them. There's three of them. There's a fourth one right there. You guys might be wondering why this is on the oil filter. I'll show you in another video what my dad taught me a long time ago. Finally. Alright, you can see the socket sticking out. There's one bolt there. Let me take it out. There's one right here. This is the back side from the back of the engine to the firewall. So the back side of the rear cover, or the back side of the lower cover, I should say. 10mm there. In the middle of the bottom cover, there's a bolt that needs to come out. Right there. Sits below the engine mount, the aluminum engine mount. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. That was the last bolt for the lower cover. So you can go ahead and go down from below and pull it out. Oh, the tensioner is holding it up. Okay. Let's see if I can get it out from the top. I had to pull it up through the top because I didn't want to take off the tensioner. But here, look, you can see what I was talking about. There's kind of a seal around here. You guys see that? There's a seal, like an O-ring. Just gotta push it back in. So let's count how many holes there are in this for the bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 holes for 7 bolts. So 5, 5, and 7. 5 on the 2 uppers, 7 on the lowers. Okay, with that in place, I can show you the cover that I was talking about. It sits right here. There it is. As you can see, hopefully you guys can see that. But one side is concaved and the other side is not. The side that is concave facing towards you is the way it goes on. So you want the smooth side towards the timing belt. These gears are pretty dirty, but if you look at all the teeth, that one right there has a marking, a slight indentation. The others do not. And that mark lines up with that tiny little arrow right there. And that's how you can tell that they're lined up. I guess maybe it's a little bit off. Just a little. So that mark there, and a tiny little arrow. It's a tiny bit off. And that's how you can tell on the crankshaft. So maybe it moved a little bit when I was taking everything off. Out of all the teeth, you can see the only one that has that indentation is the one that is right above the keyway, and that's telling you the alignment mark on the top. So that little arrow right there. I don't know if you guys can see that, so let me see if I can clean it up. Let my finger get the dirt off of it. But it's right there. For the most part it's on. Dead on, but it's just a little bit off. Alright, with the lower cover off, I'm going to go ahead and remove the motor mount on the engine side. 3 bolts that hold it on. That gives you access to everything else. The water pump sits behind there. One thing to note is when you do this, the very lower bottom bolt, which is right here, strikes the frame of the car on the passenger side, so you cannot pull it out. It knocks. So just loosen them up and then pull it out. Just kind of finagle it out. That's how you have to do that. Alright, as you can see here, I marked the front cam FC for front cam, the rear cam RC for rear cam. I'm going to mark the crankshaft as well. And then that way, when you pull the belt off, this is just another insurance policy, I guess you could call it. If you make sure you have the the alignment marks on both cams and the crank lined up, you're good to go. But I just do this. I saw this trick done when I was at the dealership, and just another added level of security. So when you take the old belt off, you basically line up the new one, and you're able to see exactly how many teeth are in between each marking, and that way when you reinstall it, you're able to see whether you're on alignment, I guess is the best way to explain it. Because if you're off and you've counted teeth right, then you know it's not a good thing. So it's just another level of protection, I want to call it. But just make sure you're lined up here. There's a mark back here. I've put white out on it to make it a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to go ahead and mark it down here as well. Alright, what you're looking at is the crankshaft. I've double checked it, and it's lined up on the very top. There's a little mark on one of the teeth, and then there's an arrow. So I'm going to pick the easiest side that I'm able to get to and mark. If you're looking at this, there are peaks and valleys on the sprocket for the gear. So obviously a valley is where one of the timing belt tooths gets into, and a peak is where there is not a tooth. So I'm on the top cams, I had to mark the peaks on the cams. So that would be a valley on the belt. So I'm going to do the same down here. I'm going to mark a peak on the gear. It'll be a valley or a non-tooth on the timing belt. So I'm going to mark I'll mark that one right there. Alright, sorry if I blocked your view, but mark the sprocket and then the timing belt as well. Alright. Now next step is to get the timing belt off. And to do that, you need to loosen up the tensioner. So right here, that's the tensioner. There's one 10mm bolt right there. There's one right there. That is what you need to loosen up to get the timing belt loose. And to do that, I will loosen up the top bolt and remove the bottom bolt altogether, and that will release tension on the timing belt. And then you can go ahead and pull the belt all the way off. So loosen that bolt, take that one all the way out. It releases tension on the timing belt. Before you do that, double check your marks on the on both cams and the crank, just to make sure you're on time. We should be good to go. So you can see right there, the arrow marks up with the hill or mountain of the gear tooth. There's a little arrow. There's a little arrow on the engine block, and then there's an arrow on the tooth itself. So just make sure those are lined up, and then go ahead, go up top. I'm lined up here, right there, up there, and there, on the back. I'm lined up there. I'm going to loosen the top bolt and then remove the bottom one altogether, and that'll loosen up timing. Comes loose. These two bolts are the same size, so don't worry about one being longer than the other or any oddball stuff like that. Alright, the bottom one's out. Timing belt's loose. I'm going to go ahead and take out the top one as well. Tensioner should be loose. There we go. Timing belt's loose. As you can see, this came right off the vehicle right now. There's oil on top of this, so this tensioner is compromised. This is the long tensioner, tensioner 2 that I was talking about. So you can see all the oil that's covered up. This has been leaking for a while. If you push it on the ground, still holding tension, but I'm glad I bought that component kit. I'm just going to replace this whole thing, not even mess with it, because that is covered in oil, and I don't want this thing, you know, breaking down on the road and jump timing, you know, 50, 100, 2,000 miles, whatever the case may be. Just that peace of mind by replacing this. Next thing I'm going to do is take off the timing belt. Right here is the front cam, rear cam. That right there is the water pump. There's a tensioner idler pulley I'm replacing as well. And right down there, that guy, that's the idler pulley. There's a tensioner for the accessory drive belt. The air conditioning, power steering. Now to get this off, once you've taken the tensioner off, you just need to walk it off of the all the gears, the teeth, the sprockets. So go ahead, come around here. Take it off the idler tensioner. Take it off the rear cam, out underneath the water pump, the front cam, the other idler, and then it comes off the crank. Way down there, and the belt's off. So let's take a look at this belt. Doesn't look that bad. So now I'm going to count the teeth in between the two cams and the marking down here. Actually, I'm going to count the valleys, because it's actually a valley. So I'm going to count the valleys between the teeth and mark it on the new one. Alright guys, here's the old belt I was talking about. Here's the front cam marking. Here's the rear cam marking. And then way down here is where I marked it on the crank. And why I did this is that if you count the teeth between the two, I mean, you're lined up on the cam and the crank on both sides, but if you count the teeth, that's just another guarantee that you're right on target, right on mark, and that you are in alignment. So what I got from, I did this 3 times, and basically how I did it is on the cam, you're on a peak. So the cam tooth actually sits inside the valley of the timing belt. So when I marked it, that's where it's marked. is on a valley in the timing belt. So when I counted in between teeth, I counted the valleys. The valleys, not the peaks. So I did it 3 times on each, from the front crank to the rear crank. I mean, from the front cam to the rear cam, and then from the rear cam to the crank. So I did it 3 times. The number I got from front cam to rear cam was 65, and then from the rear cam to the crank. So here's the new one. Gates timing belt. Can you guys see that? T286. And it doesn't matter where you start on this, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and take my white out and mark a valley on this. So I line it up, okay? So we'll call this front cam again. F C, okay? Now I'm going to count 65 valleys from this mark here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 60. 61, 62, 63, 64, 65. Wow, that's kind of convenient. 65 landing on number 6 of the T286. So then I'll take this and I'll mark it right there. Okay. And I'll call this RC, just like I did on the other one for rear cam. Okay. I'm going to double check this just to be safe. I'm going to count from rear cam to front cam now. 1, 2, 3, 62, 63, 64, 65. There's a front cam. Haha, awesome. So now I'm going to go from the rear cam to the crank. But I won't bore you guys with that. You guys get the idea. So mark the front and rear cam, mark the crank somewhere that's convenient, and then count the teeth, mark it on the new timing belt, and that way when you go ahead and reinstall the new one, you know you're lined up. Your alignment marks on the cam and the crank will be lined up, and then you'll also have that extra, assurance that the timing belt is lined up as well, because of these marks. All right. So I'm gonna finish marking from the rear cam to the crank.